Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We got our Remo Hobby parts in from Aliexpress. They are original Remo Hobby parts to replace the front drive shaft or front axle that we broke. So we're going to get this thing flipped upside down. I'm going to take the body off because this really doesn't apply to most of the Remo Hobbies. They just have a Lexan body that you take off. So I'm going to take this body off, get it flipped upside down, show you the easy way to do it. Really only takes about 10 minutes. And we'll get you back in four-wheel drive. So let's get started. Alright guys, I got it zoomed in a little closer, got it upside down. Now, you don't really have to take your front wheel off to do this. You can take it off if you just want to get it out of the way to give yourself more room. But you really just need to take the screws out of the C-hub. So you take the bottom one off. These are just the pivot points for the C-hub. So you take the bottom one off, flip it over, take the top one. Try to keep this in view so you guys can see what screws I'm actually taking out. So that's the shoulder bolts that the C-hub pivots on. And that will basically just slide right off. Now you can see that your front axle shaft, your hub is still in the wheel. So all that just kind of moves out of the way. This is what the dog bone fits into. So now we're going to flip it back over. And really all you have to do, I already took my shafts out because I made it two-wheel drive while I was waiting on the parts. There are 4 screws that you need to loosen. You don't have to take this thing all the way apart. Just loosen these 4 screws. Take your C-hub off and then take this one screw out, which would be this little guy's. Technically, you can just take these 2 screws out and you would accomplish the same thing, but it's easier to do this first and then put the hub back on, because sometimes this can get a little hard to get off and on. So pull that off. Now I've already got this bottom screw out and these 4 screws around the pumpkin loose, and what that's going to do is allow me to separate this a little bit. Because your axle shaft, go ahead and get this one out of the pack. Alright, so when you pull your axle shaft out, the one that's broken, you're going to have to separate this a little bit because this bearing sits inside the plastic and it's captured by, when it pinches together, it holds that bearing in place from sliding out. So when you pull your shaft out, it's going to be on the broken shaft, and it's going to have this C-clip on it. So you got to pull this C-clip off, take your bearing off, and put it on the new shaft. So we're going to get this back on. This really isn't necessary. If you wanted to leave this C-clip off and just leave the bearing in the housing, then you wouldn't have to separate your housing to replace broken shafts, but it does help hold it in place. Now the tricky part is, now that I've already got one side done, I can hold the pinion and hold this other wheel, because you're going to have to find out where this flat side keys into the center. But it's usually not too hard.
That's what she said.
So just you'll feel it lock in there, and then just have to give it a little push. And once you get to a certain point, you have to separate this where the bearing will go through the housing there. Alright, so separate a little bit. You see it slides right in there. And that's where it's going to hold that bearing in place. So we can put our hub back on. Make sure you put it the right direction. Which I believe is the shorter side. So there's a shorter side and a longer side. You see it's kind of at a bit of an angle there. So you're going to want the bottom of your wheel to kick out, so the shorter looking one is the top. So if you're working upside down, make sure you put the top to the top. Line it up on our third slot there. Good to go there. Put this guy back in here. This is the one that holds the two halves of the axle together. Get that guy snug. And we need our key to hold the two bottom nuts. This doesn't have to be super tight, guys. This just needs to be snug. That's snug. And we'll get the front one here. And the back one. These are just for the C-hubs. Again, they don't have to be super tight. And this is plastic, so we're just snugging them up. Now make sure that that's in place. We're going to line up the dog bone so it slides right on there. You might have to move your servo a little bit to get it back in place, and then we'll put our pivot bolt in. Again, we're just waiting to feel it snug up, because that's what it pivots on. It doesn't have to be tight. Flip it over. We'll put our top one in. That's snug. And then we want to tighten the two top ones on the pumpkin. We don't have to use the nut driver on those because they thread right into the upper 3-link. So just tighten those up. And that's it. So we are 4-wheel drive again. All we got to do is put our drive shaft back in the front, put our body back on, and we're ready to go. So if you guys need Remo Hobby parts, you can get the Remo Hobby brand that fit this guy from Aliexpress. It took about 2 weeks to come in, and I ordered 2 more sets for the rear and 2 sets for the front. So now I have these 2 and 1 more front one that is not broken. I put the 2 new ones in there, and the one that came with it originally I took out, and the one that was broke I took out. So I have 3 front, 4 rear. That should get me by for a while. I could have just ordered the ones that I wanted. Shipping is super cheap from AliExpress, but I figured if I'm going to order them, this was $30 worth of parts. So I figured I'd go ahead and get enough for the front and rear just in case I need them. It's good to have them on hand, then I don't have to wait. And we're back in 4-wheel drive. So thanks for watching, guys. Any questions about the Remo Hobby? I do recommend them. They're great crawlers. We're going to go test the 4-wheel drive out, so watch for the next video.